What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Witch in the Working. So today we're going to change things up a little bit, and I'm going to have a little cup of tea here with us. Thought we'd share this moment. I got this tea. It's a blueberry, a chamomile with a slight hint of mint in there, which I thought would be very calming and, kind of, like I said, change things up a little bit and share some tea with everyone. So before we get started in this episode, let's give her a little taste and nope. Cheers. Now that's up to snuff. What's up, everybody? Blessed be. My name's Mannun, and you're watching Witch in the Working, where we will be discussing all things witchy in and around, throughout and about, above, below, and beyond. So, throughout the world of the occult, there are many divisions, practices, styles, societies, and paths. Not all, but many of these organizations, so to speak, involve a practice that embraces marking a rite of passage with a specialized sequence of events or ritual, if you will, that establishes a person's acceptance and status into a chosen circumstance, position, or society. This practice is called initiation. So we're going to talk about that today in this episode. Let's get into it. Roll the intro. Welcome back, everybody. So, according to Wikipedia, initiation is a rite of passage marking entrance or acceptance into a group or society. It could also be a formal admission to adulthood in a community or one of its formal components. In an extended sense, it can also signify a transformation in which the initiate is reborn into a new role. Initiation rites take place in many cultures all over the world. Most initiations involve a symbolic death, a rebirth, and bloodshed of some sorts. From tribes of Africa initiating the boys and girls in the communities from adolescent to manhood or womanhood, to secret societies of knowledge and wisdom played out by the many establishments of secrecy around the world. Initiations have taken place throughout the centuries and date back thousands of years since man has come together and developed a need and importance to separate and mark specific times of existence in a person's life and spiritual growth and acceptance. Initiations are performed for multiple reasons. Not all of these reasons necessarily pertain to every initiation, but indeed for most of the initiatory situations in existence. One such reasoning is a symbolic death and rebirth. Most initiatory practice involves this symbology, and many systems of initiation go through great lengths to recreate this natural act of life. Part of the reasoning behind this psychology that if one goes through a heavily symbolic death, they will not fear the real deal as such anymore. Another basis of initiation is so that an individual can be revealed mysteries and secrets that pertain to that particular system's foundations of acquiring a deeper meaning to life. So in essence, these secrets and deeper contemplations being revealed to the initiate in fact gives them, for example, a giant aha moment, teaching them and bringing forth realizations of their existence moving forward, causing them to feel separate and accepted from the commoners or not yet initiated, so to speak. Another reasoning for initiations in some cultures involves the revelation and acclamation of a transcendental world or a spirit world. So upon reaching a specific point or mental, physical, or psychological marker in your growth as a spiritual being in a particular system, you are introduced to a world beyond the worlds. This is in turn usually used as a tool in spiritual ladder for growth and development and enlightenment. And lastly, initiations will take place to introduce and demonstrate spiritual values to an initiate. Again, the specifics being much like a recipe for a cake. It's going to be different throughout the many cultures and societies around the world. So let's get into some examples of initiation practices. Religious and spiritual. This is one of the most common forms of initiatory practice. Wicca, with its many initiatory traditions, falls into this category. Gardnerian, Alexandrian, Blue Star, Georgian, Minoan, Dianic, almost any form of Wicca that is traditionally based will most likely envelop and embrace a system of initiatory practice in its mechanics. This involves a process that integrates a mentor, priest figure, or teacher shepherding a student or initiate along a path of knowledge and spiritualism, in fact, sort of grooming them to ultimately take that first step on their new path as an enlightened initiate. In many forms of Wicca, this can be a traditional year and a day of guidance and training. It doesn't have to be a year and a day as tradition will dictate in some cases. It can be sooner or in fact much later, depending on the growth and understanding of the initiate involved in said practice. Specifically in Wicca, an initiation in fact marks the beginning of the person's transition into a new world of magic and spiritualism, with the revelation of an order or system of secrecy that in turn reveals a mystery of enlightenment that the initiate will begin to be introduced to. Again, the system in most cases is what's called oath-bound, hence the many oath-bound traditions of Wicca. And this is in fact one of the main separations of what would be called traditional Wicca versus eclectic Wicca. After this active initiation, in many of the traditions, the person is now a full-fledged witch of that particular tradition and is then introduced to all of the substance, tools, and particular stories and beliefs and teachings of said tradition that has been passed down generation to generation down a solid foundation of lineage and tradition. In most traditional Wiccan practices, this is one step of at least 3 circumstances, the other 2 or more being labeled as elevations. These elevations are very much just like the initiation, only the elevation now constitutes more of a growth and introduction to higher mysteries rather than a solid symbolic death and rebirth as the initiation did previously. In some of these traditions of Wicca, it's a strong belief that it takes a witch to make a witch. This follows the shamanic practices of many cultures around the world, where a shaman will always find a student to pass their practice on to, a lot like the storybook fables of like the wizard and his trusty apprentice. In many, not all, Wiccan practices will follow suit to this theory and practice. This type of initiation can be traced back for centuries. One of the earliest cultures to embrace this type of initiation was the ancient Greeks with their Eleusinian mysteries. In many religious type initiations, not only are the secrets and mysteries passed along to the initiates involved, but also a sort of passing of a power from the initiator to the initiate, which sort of emulates an apostolic succession. And as mentioned earlier, a major part of this initiatory practice is a symbolic death and rebirth, as a sort of out with the old life and begin a new and spiritualistic journey moving forward. Wicca is not the only initiatory religious foundation. It's also a key component of, okay, I'm gonna attempt to say these names, bear with me, and I don't wanna hear any shit if I get it wrong, but I'm doing the best I can. We've got Judaism, Sufism, Shiism, Vaishnavism, Sant Mat, Surat, Shab Yoga, and Vajrayana Buddhism. To name a few other types of initiations, you also have to include military type initiations. For instance, where it is traditional for sailors to go through a specific initiation upon accomplishing certain tasks, such as crossing over the equator. Tight bonds are formed in situations and circumstances like this, and through hazing and trials, a solid foundation and special relationship is in fact built between the brothers and sisters in arms, so to speak, that is shared and embraced for years going forward. There's also tribal initiations that take place that many times include the marking of a point in time when an adolescent becomes a man or woman. Many times this ceremony is very intense and involves genital mutilation and circumcision for both boys and girls. Okay, so let's talk about self-initiation. So self-initiation is relatively a new concept in neo-paganism. This is the practice of performing an initiation on oneself. This concept completely defeats the logic behind an initiatory practice, in that in an initiation, a key concept is that an initiator who has been previously initiated in the same manner and energy passes this energy and sacred bond along to the initiate, therefore producing an unbroken chain or lineage of the experience, person to person, teacher to student, master to apprentice, so to speak. Nonetheless, somewhere along the lines, somebody figured they didn't have an initiator and really wanted to be called an initiate and or say they were initiated into whatever system they created, and invented the concept of self-initiation. Nobody can self-initiate into a traditional lineage of Wicca. There's a system of checks and balances within every tradition, and there's no such thing as a self-initiation within most every lineage-based system of Wicca. However, to name one famous tradition of Wicca that does embrace self-initiation, it would be Seax Wicca, created by Raymond Buckland. So if you have the crazy idea of, for instance, self-initiating into, say, Gardnerian, Alexandrian, or Georgian Wicca, for instance, good luck, you're not gonna get far. Dedication. Dedication is the quality of being dedicated or committed to a task or purpose. Unlike initiation, dedication within Wiccan practices is when a person or persons commit themselves to a particular path or practice of the occult, and maybe to the god and goddess or a particular god and goddess. For instance, a newcomer in Gardnerian Wicca is subject to studying the basic concepts in 101, so to speak, for the first year and a day as a dedicant with Gardnerian practice. This means they have taken an oath to study and do their best to learn these concepts over the next year and a day prior to their official initiation. Also, they're dedicating themselves to the practice of Wicca, the god and goddess, and to whatever coven they're practicing with, as well as taking an oath to never ever reveal the covenstead or the other witches practicing alongside him or herself. This is just the way it's done in Gardnerian practice. As far as other traditions or eclectic Wiccan practices are concerned, they can differ in any and all ways. Dedication is an act that most eclectics will practice as a very valid and beautiful ritual, an act to sort of set a stamp on and solidify their foundation of who, what, when, where, and why they decided to walk a particular path moving forward in their lives. There are many dedication rituals that can be found online and in books if you're interested in doing this yourself. Initiation, that's a little tougher, as this involves, for the most part, finding and joining a coven and or tradition of Wicca. And like I mentioned earlier, self-initiation, I personally don't buy into that concept, so I can't offer any information in that area. Sorry. Well, that's going to bring this episode of Witch Into Working to a close. How do you feel about initiations in Wicca? Are you an initiate or a dedicant in a tradition? Are you dedicated to a particular path of any sorts? What other initiatory practices can you add to this list? Let us all know in the comments below, and please subscribe to my channel and ring that bell to remind you of future episodes to come. I love you guys and gals. Until next time, next week, blessed be, and see you soon. Love ya.